Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Thank you to those who wrote a journal this morning. Hope those are all in the box now so I can take a look at those later this week. So today what we are going to be doing, hopping back on the story writing train, is we're going to be talking about pacing, which is a huge part of story writing, which is going to focus on the important parts and the not so important parts of our story and how much time we should be spent writing on those. And this will give you a good idea, because if you are trying to write every small little detail of your story, you are going to end up with a 20-page story, which is great, but is not the goal of this project that we're doing. So, with that being said, a good story doesn't just describe one event after another, and it doesn't take an equal amount of time describing each event. So as you see here, all of these events in this slide are the same amount of time is spent describing them, and nothing really is elaborated in each part. So instead, what should be done with a story is it takes some events and expands them to make them a little bit more big, more dramatic, and then squeezes in the smaller, less important parts so they're not as described. So if we wanted to take a look at one of the stories that we already read, the story Frog, it starts with some exposition about the character who never really gets to stay at home and then shows the parents leaving. Next, we see the character eating, dancing, making a mess in the house, and then you can see this is a little bit more time is spent on this one because she really enjoys her time alone, and we kind of see that whole process of her spending time by herself, having a good time. And then after that, the biggest part of the story happens. This is where she sees the frog, where she tries a few things to get it out, and then where she actually finally gets it out of the house. So because this part is the most dramatic, it takes up the biggest part of the story. And then, once that's over, she cleans up, gets in her pajamas, and watches TV. This part isn't very dramatic, so it goes a lot quicker than when she sees the frog and has to deal with it. And then finally, her parents come home, and at this point, the story is just about done, so that part doesn't have to take up a lot of time either. So there's another thing that you should notice about the story is each of the chunks is done in a different way. The exposition is written as a summary, but the part where the parents decide to leave is done as a full scene. So this has dialogue, more specific actions, and it's basically like the actors are actually coming on stage and acting this part out. And then when Bree, the character, is eating, dancing, and making a mess, it is seen as a summary. It just kind of summarizes everything that happens, doesn't really give a lot of description. And then after that is done, it's another scene. So the scene where the frog comes in and that everything happens there, it's done super slowly because we want to see every minute go by and have a nice description of what is going on so we can really experience what she's going through. And then once that's over, the character cleans up, so forth, and that's also another summary because we don't really see exactly each part of what happens. It's just, as you can see, it's a smaller part compared to this one, so it's just a brief summary. Not a lot of time spent on that part. And then when her parents finally come home, we get to see this again as a scene. Not so important, but it is a scene. They do come home, and we see them kind of acting it all out. So at 3 different parts in the story, we also see a break in time. So after the parents leave, there's a jump ahead in time, and then another one after she gets rid of the frog, and then another one after she settles back down and when her parents finally come home. All of those breaks are because readers don't really want to see every minute. So some chunks of time aren't that interesting, so we can skip over it. and get to the more interesting parts. Because if we spent time describing every single piece of the story, the author would have a 30-page book. But instead, it's condensed into only a few pages because she decided to focus on only the bigger parts, and then with those bigger events, broke them up between smaller pieces or the bigger event that happened. So now you're going to try doing this with your own story. So think about how you're going to be writing your story and then create a diagram similar to this one. So you're going to want to plan out which parts are going to be the big ones and which parts are going to be the small ones. So think about which parts you can summarize and then which parts you want to make actual scenes. And then you might want to put some time breaks between. So the lines, like we saw in this slide here, the lines here indicate time breaks. So a little bit of time passes by, which is going to help you limit how much you're actually going to be writing. So you're going to go ahead now and plan out your events. It doesn't exactly have to look like this one, but this is just going to give you a rough idea. So smaller events are going to be smaller, like this one, the ones that are least important. And then maybe if you have a big event, your conflict, your climax, something like that, you might want to spend a little bit more time writing about. So go ahead, start writing, and maybe label what each event is as well. So make sure you're labeling each event, giving a little bit of idea how much time you're going to be spent writing on it. And then once you're done that, you are going to start draft number 2. So when you're writing draft number 2, keep in mind the important events and how big each event is going to be. Happy writing!